Well, I think I could have taken it.
I don't think I need to say that we're all very excited to see Super Smash Bros. Making its way onto the Nintendo Switch, especially when we know that it's scheduled to release sometime this year. So with everybody's hype thruster set to max with this announcement, I'm sure we'll soon be hearing the debate of what characters we like to see in the game, especially one pertaining the size of a certain space pirate. And even though I would really like to see a new metric character be added onto the roster like other fans of the series, I instead wanted to make a video on how I would love to see another one of my favorite characters ever be included in the game, that being the Colonel of the Skeleton Crew, Elma from Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Strength comes from experience. That's true on any planet.
So why choose Elma over the protagonist of the new Xenoblade game that was released not too long ago on the Switch? Well, simply put, while I do think that Rex could be a unique character to add to the roster with his ability to change between Pyra and Mythra to aid him in battle, as well as implementing some of the blade mechanics into his combat, I still think he will play and feel a lot like Shulk or other two-handed sword fighters in terms of his attacks to some extent. I instead chose Elma not only because I think she would be another great female character to add to the roster, and whose design is also considerably different when compared to other fighters, but she also presents a unique fighting style by combining the use of dual blades and dual guns, which is something we haven't seen implemented onto a character in Smash Bros. Yet. And I also can't deny that I'm a huge fan of Elma and that I would love to see her fighting alongside Samus, so I can't deny that I might be a little bit biased in that regard. So, in true Smash Bros. Fashion, I'm going to try and suggest what could be Elma's fighting style in the game in a way that is still reminiscent to her combat abilities in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Well, my first thought was to give her two different fighting styles that she can freely switch between mid-battle, those being her swords and her guns. I instead felt that what would be the most accurate way to represent the combat from Xenoblade Chronicles X is to have some of her attacks be based around her arts, which will make her switch between the weapons. In other words, say her forward smash is based on the art Side Slash, then Elma will use her swords. While if her down smash is something taken from, say, the ending animation of Violent Streak, then she will use her dual guns. This means that Elma's weapons will be tied around her specific attacks, but she would still have the same number of inputs as other characters from the roster. So with this in mind, what weapon would she have during her idle animation? I guess the simple answer is, whichever was the last weapon she used. So say the last attack the player made was with her dual blades, then Elma's idle animation will have her wielding her swords.
Let's do this!
As for her special attacks, or B-button attacks, I was thinking of having her up special be something like Shadow Strike, since it is an art that propels her onto the air in the source game, and we can also include the downward movement made after the initial ascent if the player presses the B button a second time, which could give this move a unique recovery arc. The obvious choice that comes to mind for the side B is the art Sliding Slinger, since in the game you can use this to get close into your enemies while still attacking them. But I would probably change this attack's horizontal range depending if it's used on the ground or in the air, as well as the ability to slide off edges and platforms. The art that I think that could make for a good neutral B is 100 Shells, which would have Elma fire projectile slashes from her swords in a similar fashion to Cloud's neutral B, but with an X pattern instead.
Engaging Overdrive!
Now, for the down B, I wanted to take a note from Shulk's move list and have this represent a unique gimmick from the source material's combat mechanics. In the case of Shulk, his down B represents the Monado's visions used in Xenoblade Chronicles to alert the player of a powerful incoming attack. As for Elma, I would instead use the down B to implement the Overdrive Mechanics from Xenoblade Chronicles X, which powers up the party members for a limited time. In Smash Bros., this would be a special state in which Elma's attacks become faster and stronger to simulate the quicker cooldown periods and the extra charge her arts are capable of having during Overdrive. To make things easier for the players to understand, I would give Elma an Overdrive counter that increases whenever the player successfully hits an opponent with a special attack. This number will represent how long the overdrive will last whenever the player activates it when pressing down B, and can only be increased outside of the special state and up to a specific amount. So you can't add to the counter whenever the character is in the overdrive period, and it will also return to 0 if you lose a stock.
I'm better off in the Skell.
What I think is the most obvious choice for the final smash is to have Elma board a skill and then perform 1 out of 3 or so attacks that are based around the weapons used by the mechs, such as the Phoenix and G-Buster, or even one of the many super weapons. Each of these weapons could vary on the amount of damage and knockback they can deal to the enemies, thus giving more options to the player. Or worst case, I would just have the skill do one predetermined attack to make things simple for the player to understand. As for which skill frame to use in the game, I would probably go with either the Formula skill, since it's the one feature in the cover of the game and in the main title screen, or the Urban skill, since it's the default one given to you upon acquiring your skill license.
Oh yeah, work it, baby!
I'm yours if you need me.
Moving outside of Elma's combat abilities, I would base her taunts around the poses made when activating passive arts such as Upper Hand, Primer, or even Ghost Factory. But if not, I think we can always just incorporate some of the emotes made by the avatar character from the game. My only request is to have at least one taunt mention something about melee attacks. Xenoblade Chronicles X fans will understand why. But for the next idea I have in mind for the character, I am required to talk about something spoiler related. So if you don't want to ruin a big surprise from Xenoblade Chronicles X, then I suggest you skip ahead to this timecode. For Elma's skin colors, I would have them be based around either the other color variations of her default outfit from the game, or based around the color schemes from other party members such as Gwyn, Lao, Irina, or Lyn. But similar to characters like Bayonetta or Corrin, we could also have some of her skins featuring Elma's Mimyoson body, while the other half features her true alien form, with each maintaining their default outfits. I think it would be pretty cool to be able to choose between the two forms like in the game, but I'm not sure if it's something completely viable as to avoid spoiling the game's story. Lastly, I would also have Elma's victory poses be based around the ones used in the concept render art for the character, while quoting one of her many lines from the game.
Well, there's no shortage of thrills, that's for sure.
I also think it would be nice to give her a unique series symbol to represent her, in the form of the green X seen in the logo of the game alongside a new victory jingle. But if not, I guess we can always just recycle the ones used by Shulk, since she is technically a Xenoblade character. As a bonus, if we were going to give this newcomer a unique stage, I will most likely base it around one of these 3 ideas. The first idea is to have a traveling stage like Delfino Plaza or Skyloft, which would be centered around the city of NLA and visiting its different districts. We could also implement a weather effect that changes between each fight so the stage can have a different cosmetic look every time. The second idea will be based around Silverloom, since it has a very unique landscape and setting while incorporating the spore weathers as a visual hazard, and have one of the many sea domes who roam around the continent to occasionally attack the players. And the last one is having players fight in Oblivia, or as it's known to the locals,
Sandy Bum Canyon.
I think the rings in the desert and the giant hole in the center can make for an interesting backdrop, and have the electromagnetic storms make some of the platforms hazardous every once in a while. In the end, Super Smash has always been a great way to introduce players to some games they might have not experienced before, and I think it would be a great opportunity for such an amazing and underrated character as Zelma to get a chance in the spotlight that she deserves.